Welcome back, everybody. This is the Time to Lean podcast with Laura Danger and Crystal Britt. Today we have an incredible guest, Raena Boston. She is one of the co-founders of the Chamber of Mothers and the founder of the Working Momtras. And she writes all about the scams of motherhood, the scam of motherhood, and all sorts of amazing things, does a ton of advocacy work, and is all over the internet sharing wisdom. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Did
We're
I
so
miss
excited.
anything?
I think you got it all. I mean, I don't want to talk about my day job.
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about the actual, what you do online is incredible, and the advocacy work you do in real life. And I know, I mean, I love watching you and your walks, all of it. Love it. You're back
Yes.
to your daily walks, right?
Yes. So my kids, we actually moved them from their neighborhood school to a different school. I live in Florida, and if you've been following the news at all, you know it is real weird and getting weirder every day. And our education system is probably the weirdest of them all, inhospitable even. And I made the mistake of moving to a neighborhood for the schools. And I think that's a scam. I haven't really
What do you
talked
mean?
about this a lot. I think that we should live in the neighborhoods that make sense for us. And I think a lot of people stretch themselves financially to live in a neighborhood for the schools when it's not the right place for them.
Mm.
So if you have a lot of people who are, let's say you've stretched yourself to live in this nice neighborhood because of the schools, and like, I'm not even going to get into like the racism, systemic racism, structural racism that is baked into all of that. Um, but you move into a neighborhood for the schools, but what if you're not like any of the people in the neighborhood because your bank account isn't like theirs? You're like, and so like the neighborhood isn't even set up for you, let's say, as like a regular middle class person. It's set up for wealthy people who are trying to keep other people out so that they can have their schools the way they want them. And so I moved from like the urban core of Tampa, which is where I'm from, and it has all these cool historic houses, and it's so fun and quirky and completely gentrified now. And so we moved. The neighborhood schools were quote unquote really bad, and so that was like a lot of anxiety in my household. I kind of was of the impression that like you go to the neighborhood school, you invest in the school. If everybody sent their kids to the school and wasn't so worried, then the school would have no reason but to improve because people are invested, plugged in, providing their time, talents, resources, and also not like I need to separate my kids from those kids because they're going to drag my kids down, even though that's not how it works. And so
Mm-mm.
anyway, I feel like I bought into the scam of moving to a neighborhood for the schools, and I moved. And our neighborhood is just like a very regular one, but like around us and the surrounding neighborhoods, people are zoned to have horses. So like you can just imagine people are cantering out of the big iron gates out of their big ass houses on big ass stretches of lawn, and there's literally somebody cantering down the sidewalk. So like you gotta have to be rich as hell to afford a horse, house a horse on your property, and then canter down the damn sidewalk. So I say all of that to say, like, this neighborhood isn't like really set up for like two working people who are like doing their best. Whereas, like, the city over, they have subsidized preschool. They have, all of these different programs like before and after care. They have, all of these like camps, any and everything that you can think of. It's set up for middle class people. Whereas, like, we have stretched ourselves to live in this neighborhood, and it's not designed for people like us. And I think that is such a scam, and I think we need to talk about it more. And I hope to talk about it more. Anyway, that was an aside from like I moved my kids because their school is not diverse at all. And Black History Month happened, and I don't think a word was said. Part of that is that people in Florida are very afraid to bring up race because of
Mm.
legislation. We made the decision to move them to a Title I magnet school where everybody, whether they're in the magnet program or not, has access to the same IB curriculum. There's no segregation in that way, but it's diverse. It's extremely diverse. And I really feel like we're only, a week or so in, but the teachers really have to like work with that. They have to offer things in Spanish and English. They have to be, understand like the demographics of the neighborhood of and the kids that they support, and like they are supporting them. Whereas I kind
Mm-hmm.
of feel like at my kids' old school, it was just kind of like I really feel like the teachers had the attitude of like I've arrived at this school, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
retire here, and it's an A school, and so that's it.
Yeah, there's a couple of years ago before all of like the like CRT legislation, all of that stuff started called Nice White Parents.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
uh yeah, through NPR in which was an incredible podcast that talked so much about that idea of like this charter school that wasn't well funded, that was in quote unquote like a bad area, and then all of these white parents started taking their kids and putting them in there in kind of like this white saviorism kind of way, veiled white saviorism, right, to come in and fix that. And so I that's it's so interesting to hear you talk about like from especially a place like Florida where it's like this is, the idea that we're sold as parents, and I feel like it's specifically toward mothers of like, oh, well, you've got to move to a place where they're like quote unquote good schools, or like, you move there for the school. You do what you have to sacrifice financially, culturally, societally in order to make sure that your kids have the best. That's what moms do.
And I would even take it so far as to if parents, what they're needing is community, how can you build community with people who are just don't take in the world the same way? Like they don't in many ways it feels like there's less of an incentive to like be neighborly, like all of the things that you would do in a community where you felt safe or felt like you had something in common, or and like also like I'm in MAGA country up here too, so it's also like that because I'm like
I was
I'm
gonna
just
ask. So you moved schools recently, but you also moved locations. Did you do that at the same time? Did you move into a neighborhood that got you into the magnet?
no. So I we moved from Tampa in 2019 over here. Um, and then we sent them to the neighborhood school, and that's when we were just like, whoa, wait a minute. Like none of this is feeling right. There's like it's just this doesn't feel good. It feels off. And it's like a lot of it's just very not it's not diverse.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of
So
people
it's
raising lions, not sheep up here.
so you did, I mean, I brought all of this up because you were walking.
Yes,
And
yes.
so now you're telling me that this is a disruption, and now are you not able to walk to the magnet anymore?
We can't walk to the magnet. The boys take the bus, but I can walk them to the bus stop. So, like, the walks are still happening. They're not as long, but we still have that time together.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, as so I have a background in education. I've only ever worked in Chicago, but I worked in a private school, private Catholic school for 6 years, and then I moved to I'm using air quotes here, a good neighborhood school that was in the midst of gentrification. It's very interesting a couple years later. And then I moved to a neighborhood school that was like, I want to say 99% kids who walked there just from around them. So in Chicago, you can lottery your way into ranked schools, you can apply to them, or you can go to the one that you're zoned for. So it can be kind of cutthroat, and you get to decide how you're going to handle that. And I know for our family, we picked where we lived with a vague idea of where our kids might go. And we did factor in what schools were walkable. But we decided when we had kids that kind of no matter what, we wanted to walk our kids to school because of the benefit of knowing our neighbors and our kids having neighborhood kids to be friends with. But like you're saying, like it's really important that we know our neighbors, like, and get along with them. Because if we lived in another neighborhood, I don't know how we would feel. We would either probably move or feel really nervous sending our kids to a school, like you said, that's not diverse or doesn't have neighbors with values or morals that align with how we feel. You're so right. Like,
I
how do we
love
change that?
I love the way that you said that too, Raina, of like people like how can you build community with folks who like fundamentally don't experience life in the same way that you do, right? Like experiencing life in a way that's like, cantering out your horse from an iron rod gate down the street is very different than, right? Like living in a place where, you can walk to go get coffee when you walk to go get your kids, right? Like Laura is expressing, like in Chicago, those are worlds away from each other. Those are not, that's a very large gap to bridge. That's not, um, I don't know anyone currently, any parent that has the energy to do that, to try and ride that canyon of nuance with neighbors, at the end of the day. It's like, no, I need my people around me and I need it to be solid.
Yeah. And I also think that I think what happens, particularly in conservative areas, is the over reliance, glorification of the nuclear family. So why would they build
Mm,
community if the nuclear family is where it's at?
Mm,
If so many people could walk to school and they choose not to for whatever reason, but they would rather queue in the line when we're like, that's the thing that like, I'm just like, even like in a community, let's say you need to drive to school, whatever, but like, why wouldn't you just ask your neighbor if their kid needs a ride? If you're all going to the same place twice a day, like it's just like not even a thought. It feels like that occurs to people. It's
I've
just
never
like,
made that connection before. That's so interesting.
there's just not a community minded aspect. And also like what feels very true for me is like, being a Florida native and being here after a lot of people moved here from other states, like they've migrated to Nashville or whatever as well, and they're looking for a quote unquote free state. It's like the people that are moving here they're not sending their best. So I'm not trying
Mm.
to create community with them either, right? Like I'm not trying to. I am like so completely and totally done with the notion of like proving myself to anybody
mm.
or um, my kids having to prove themselves in order to be accepted or be anything other than like their amazing selves or having to be exceptional or extraordinary. Like, hell no. So, on the flip side, I don't have a ton of community, which is really, really, really hard. It's really,
That
really
was,
hard.
yeah, that was going to be my follow up. I mean, you are the community person. You have the Working Momtras, which is its own community. You are very involved, one of the founding members of the Chamber of Mothers, which is awesome. And I also feel lucky enough to be a part of that. I'm not on the board, but have been a part of spreading the wings over to Chicago. Um, how, if you're not necessarily in community or feel very connected in community with the people who share physical space with you, how do you find community?
I think that's why I've like gravitated so much online is it has been, I can talk to people about like childcare and, why it's so fucked up and the things that need to happen. I can talk about my experience with paid parental leave and unpaid parental leave. I can talk about like all of those things and cultivate community and like be a safe space to have those conversations. And even in the working mom tours, like even just talking about my experience with motherhood because I'm just so uninterested in like being a good mom. Because what the fuck does that even mean? I'm not interested in indulging those scams anymore. And like, I just talk about it. I just talk about it. I just want to talk about the fact that like we were not created to just rely on the nuclear family. That's why we're depressed. It's why like it's a scam. And so and
Mm-hmm.
like the scam also kind of leaves you feeling like if I just try harder, it's me that's broken and it never when you're so caught up in the scam, you can't say, well, wait a minute. Mm-mm. We can't all be doing it wrong. The system is wrong. The institution is wrong. And we don't have the time to question those types of things. So I'm just going to talk about it. And like that is the community that I've been focused on cultivating and just having those conversations. And it sucks to not be able to be around people physically that I can create community with.
You said something kind of hilarious and brilliant, which is that we keep expecting mothers to pull themselves up by their fallopian tubes.
That's amazing.
What do you mean?
We have given mothers zero support for almost everything. And yet we continue as mothers to overfunction, overachieve, overproduce. And then we say things, throw platitudes like superwoman, supermom, but like that just means that nobody has to give them any help. Like it's so empty and vacuous and meaningless. But like we just expect moms to like do it, to just do whatever it is. Whether it's, go back to work 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, exist without income after having a baby. Um, I don't know. We just expect them to work as if they don't have kids and parent as if they don't work. Like, I mean, that's the expectation. And if you're not able to meet those metrics, then you're broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when I say pull themselves up by their fallopian tubes, it's like you're just going to keep on keeping on regardless and do all those things. And that is the expectation.
Yeah, another thing that you recently said, and I mean, you talk about this all the time with paid leave, and I know that's one of the pillars of the Chamber of Mothers, but you recently tweeted something about someone who got laid off while pregnant. And I'm going to come back to this in a second. I was laid off during my maternity leave, and it was totally legal, unethical, really crappy. Was a horrible situation to have to go through, and try to find insurance with a newborn, stuff like that. But it happens legally all of the time. What is I mean, I don't even know what I'm getting at. It's horrible. That's what I'm getting at. It's horrible. You were talking about this recently with layoffs during pregnancy and during maternity leave. Why are you so pissed about it, I guess?
Um, I often so I did a podcast with Ann Helen Peterson. I did Work Appropriate, and I talked about it from like the lens of being a mom who works in HR and just thinking about all of this, right? And the question was, is it ethical for me to not disclose that I'm pregnant while I'm job searching? Or is it ethical or unethical for me to know I'm going to resign on my leave and like still, take my paid leave? And ethics are not the right question. Corporations are not people, and they do not behave ethically unless there is a legal repercussion that is forcing them to do the right thing. And so you have to do what's best for you. And I also like think about like the baked in sexism of like how women are also like need to look out for like these other people, like when they're making these kinds of decisions. And it's almost like, so you have to like do the right thing, be the good, to make the best possible choice for like, but like, it is okay to make the best choice for you.
Mm-hmm.
That is totally okay. And I don't, and I think I know women are not taught that, because it's like a
Mm-hmm.
constant like death, I feel like, is being a woman in this country. Like, and it starts with marriage in a lot of ways, like you're two becoming one. You're in some Christian thoughts of you're submitting, you know, the man is the head. And so you're dying to that self. And then when you have kids, you die to even more, because like it's all about them. You become a mommy martyr. And, you know, you're just not, you're not a person anymore. That's the like, that's just is like, to me, is like you become less and less of a person, like the more you exist in this country as a woman. And I like would say, even for like child free women, it's like the derision and the scorn and like scrutiny and skepticism with which we view people who choose not to have children is just, as particularly women, is just absolutely unreal.
I found I mean, the name, the Working Mantra, is very interesting. Um, and I'm sure you thought about this too and think about this. Working mom is such a loaded term, and it's really refreshing and interesting to see the way that you have claimed it. And to your point, when I was laid off on my leave, I interviewed for new jobs 10 days postpartum. And you know, when you're 10 days postpartum, you look pregnant. I looked I looked about 6 months pregnant and didn't have clothes to wear, and walked in to the meeting. I had to be in person. I walked in and I had to disclose immediately that I had just had a baby, because I didn't want them to think I was going about to have a baby. I needed that job. And when I went from having that baby, I was a new mom. I was immediately a mother in their mind, which came with bias. And I have a newborn and I'm going to have to pump on my brakes and all of these things. Um, but then when I got to work, I immediately felt like I was a teacher, which is a care profession. Um, I felt like teacher was who I was. I was teacher, I was mom, I was wife. I was those things. I completely disappeared because of the unique pressures of all of those things. So, like you said, mommy martyr, super mom, all of these labels, like, how do you, in this space of motherhood and with the working mantras, help fight back on that?
I think that it's a constant reminder that, in a reminding people to remember that they're a person first. No matter how many times society is going to try and scam you out of that, your identity is not those things. It is that it is you. It's your personhood. And like, that's the biggest scam of all, is that like you become, like, people try and reduce you down to, like, I'm even thinking about Kiki Palmer's boyfriend. You a mom. Like, but like, you know, that means so many things. Like, it's not just one thing. Like, it contains multitudes. So like, how could you even like say that and just try and like reduce it down to nothingness? So like, I'm going off on a tangent, but like my whole point is like, the scam is believing that you are these other like identities, like your identity is those things, but like not you anymore. You just like being divorced of like your personhood when you become a or partnership in a marriage, or when you have kids, or any of those things. And it's a lie. And I'm so glad you said something about the name, the Working Momtras. I feel like there's a lot of pushback on the term working mom. And what I want people to really think about is, if domestic labor is labor, it is, you should be talking about your fucking work like it's work. You should be
Mm-hmm.
calling yourself a working mom. Every single last one of us should be calling themselves a working mom. Period. It's not, we don't even, like, all of us are working. What if we all just said that we were working moms And we could talk about, break that down, talk about what that means if we want to. But we're all working moms. It's all work. And I think some of this like debate tries to get into like, and I think this happens so much in American culture, particularly, is who's working harder, who has it easier. We're always trying to like understand that. And like, it doesn't matter. We're all working. And if you're a working mom, no matter what kind of work you are doing, it's undervalued, it's underappreciated. Like if we could all just have the solidarity of like, and none of us are paid what we're worth, and none of us are appreciated to the lengths that we need to be appreciated, I think we could get to solidarity faster, which is like my big thing is like that's what we need.
That saying that is really interesting because it reminds me of the carpool. Like the idea, actually, we just found out there's a kid 2 doors down who is in the same class as my youngest. And I immediately was like, it would be really nice to connect with them because if I can't make it, they can drop my kid off. And it's, it's really interesting that we don't do that because it is part of that like you have to work hard because I have to work hard. And it's almost like there's the comparison of you I work harder than you, but there's also like the punishment that I think that a lot of mothers especially get into about like I need to feel like this is important. So if it's hard for me, it's got to be hard for you, which is just as toxic. The comparison of like pain and suffering. I'm suffering more, so I must be a good mom and you should suffer too.
The other thing I'm thinking about as you're saying that is the scam of doing it all. And
Mm.
so when you internalize that belief of like, I got to do it all, you can't ask another mom to cover for you. Because what does that mean about you as a mom? You can't cut it, you can't hack it. You're imposing on somebody. How dare you impose? And like, I really feel like what we need more of, like, in order to build community, is imposing on one another more.
Okay, I love that. Tell us more.
I mean, it's not fully cooked, but I'll tell you, it's like we don't even know how to be there for people because we people don't impose themselves. And like I think that there's like another thing I think happens in our culture is like we always think somebody's trying to get over on somebody else. And like so like that is another thing that puts the hackles up of like I can't ask for help. I'm in this by myself. My nuclear family should be enough. When in a community, everybody's going to need one another at some point. But if you can't ever impose on somebody, you always have to be the person that's doing it all. There is no room for community. And so you're
Well,
isolated and you're lonely and all the things. Go ahead, Crystal. Sorry.
no, you're fine. And also reframing like the idea of what imposing feels like and means, right? Like in a capitalist, like yesterday, Laura made a video talking about toxic individualism. And in toxic individualism, imposing is asking for anything, right? Imposing becomes asking somebody if they could wait at the school while you're running 5 minutes late so that your kid doesn't think that you forgot to pick them up, right? Like that feels like an above and beyond ask, right? And so in the way that we start to tear down those pieces of like, no, it's not imposing, that's like being part of a community that's different. Or like how do we, how did you grow up, what did you see modeled for you, right? Did you see community modeled for you? Did you see or was it very much like, your mom would have a reaction if you had to ask a friend for, I'm thinking of stupid shit like, if my kids go to school and they don't have, they were like, oh, I was still hungry after I ate my lunch. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh my God, like you were the kid who didn't have enough to eat at lunch. You know what I mean? Like it becomes all of this internal messaging that again goes back to the thing of like, I'm just a facilitator of caring for other people around me. I'm not a person. It's so interesting. Like this, the reason you're not hearing much from me is because it's so much is intertwined and tied together that it's like I'm just like processing all of that, and also the unspoken fact that like none of that shit happens to men, right? If men are, if men get married, then they all of a sudden they've got a responsibility that heightens their status, right? They've got a responsibility to provide for a wife, to provide for a family. So we've got to make sure he gets his hours. We got to make sure he's paid what he's worth, right? Like it just elevates his status more and more. And for women, it does the exact fucking opposite while selling us the scam of, and aren't you amazing? Look at you killing yourself for your family. That's a good mom. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh no, but literally, physically, mentally, emotionally, it's fucking killing me. But chill, I guess. I guess that's, it's very, so insidious.
So insidious. It's the other thing that I think about as you're saying that is people tend to think that gender roles, gender norms are because they affect women, I think more obviously. They seem to think that it's not also bad for men. And it
Mm-hmm.
fucks men so bad.
Yep.
And they cannot create community. They
Yes.
don't even have any frame of reference. They
Yep.
can't pick the careers that they want to be in because like they need to be taking care, providing, and not realizing that providing is like getting your ass up and making the lunches before. That is providing. That is providing something. But like
Mm-hmm.
because we've tied providing to salary,
Yep.
it like the same, like we think, oh well they make more or they, whatever, but like it's still cutting men off from their potential, their agency, their personhood.
It's reductive.
and
Yeah.
and we need to like even as we're talking about like well who has it worse, like we really have to get out of that and like start talking about how these norms like really fuck us all like in major ways.
I totally agree. That's providing, it doesn't matter how much money you make if you aren't actually turning that into something. What's it for? Yeah, like the expensive lunch doesn't mean well, paying more for a lunch doesn't make it better.
I talk about this too, and sometimes I occasionally get pushback, but my husband could only take 3 days, 5 days off work after the baby was born. And I'm just like, first of all, is that true? Do they have access to FMLA? Could you plan to have your partner take more than a week because you deserve more than a week of their time? It's not doing him any favors to be off of work for a week. What kind of quality of work is he providing? But like men deserve, and I know I'm speaking in a heteronormative way, but like men deserve to take leave. They deserve to see what it is to care give. They deserve to be there for their partner because Travis took 9 weeks off unpaid because he had access to FMLA, and I knew because I work in HR that he could take that time unpaid. And I said, I really need you to show up for me in this way. I know
Mm-hmm.
that I can tend towards depression and anxiety, and being by myself really scares me with the baby. I really need you there. And it's not really like a discussion, like, I need you to file the paperwork. And he was able to take care of us. He was able to bond. It like did amazing things for our relationship. And he probably missed out on a
Mm-hmm.
job opportunity because of it. But like this is the thing, like people are like, well, he can't take the leave because it might impact a promotion or his bonus. And it's like, what the fuck do you think is happening to women?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
The
Yep.
same stuff that happens to us needs to happen to them in order for us to be able to move any way forward. And
we were
they,
just we were just
yes,
talking about last week, right? Like absorbing the consequences of, and not in a punitive way, right? But it's the thing that moves everybody forward is when the non-dominant culture stops, the marginalized culture stops absorbing the consequence of what's going on, and the dominant culture starts observing like, oh shit, like they have to experience it in order to be like, and experiencing the good parts of it too, like you're saying, Raina, like that helped my marriage. It helped me bond with my kids. It helped me, right? Like we don't talk about enough statistically the benefits that men get from, we have evidence-based research on that,
yes. McKinsey,
you
like
know?
the worst capitalist company known to man, organization known to man, has data on like what happens when men take parental leave. And it's good.
Yep.
It's all good. It is
Yep.
all good. And so I think about that a lot. And I think about like, man, people just really don't get the point. Like he's going to miss out on a bonus. But like also when we just had Moms Equal Pay Day, the thing that's missing from the discussion is like, they don't just say like, man, we will pay you more. When they don't take leave, they don't have 3 months of pay impacted. So that's
Mm-hmm.
going to increase. They don't miss out on a promotion. They don't miss out on a
Yep.
bonus. All of those things impact your lifetime earnings. So the
Yes.
pay gap
Mhm.
is not just like we're going to pay this more, but he's not having to miss out on or take a step back from or any of these things. And that is what perpetuates the pay gap.
Mm.
And no,
Yeah.
like I don't see anybody having that conversation. And I just am like, that's the scam. That's the scam right there. I know I say it all the time, but it's like, how do you think it happens? It's not just like we're going to pay them differently for the job. It's that somebody's pay is not getting paid for however many months at a time. They're not promoting somebody because they're about to have a baby or they just did have a baby and they're making an assumption about what they can do. I mean,
Yeah.
so to
It's
me,
so
like, I just want to say one more thing. Men
yeah, oh yeah.
taking parental leave is a feminist act, period. So all these men that
That's
are saying that they're feminists and like can't be bothered to fucking take more than 3 days, like
Okay,
really?
can I tell a story really, really quickly? This is,
Yes.
and Ben and I have talked about this. This is okay for me to share. My husband's name is Ben. My husband owns his own. He's a financial advisor. Owns his own like small group of employees. Uh, he has two, and my sister was one of them that came to be hired on. And he and I have been arguing since my sister came on about paid maternity leave. And the way that his company is structured and the way that it works is that there's an overarching company that he works for, but he, also is like an independent contractor. So it's a little bit complicated. Technically, it's a small business. And I was like, so my sister who came in pregnant, or no, maybe she had just had a baby. She just had her baby in June. I go, she's getting paid maternity leave, right? Like you're offering paid maternity leave. And he's like, well, like we went back and forth and I was like, you're fucking kidding me, right? You hear me and Laura talk all day long about domestic equity. You know the work that I do, right? And he's like, yeah. And we, it'd be a point of contention. Uh, she didn't get the paid maternity leave. She used like vacation days, and then we paid for an overnight. I go, you're going to give her like a bonus or a stipend or something. We're going to use that for. They can use that for an overnight nanny if they want to. That's what they did. His second employee just had his wife had their first child in May, and they were doing something, and Ben said, I'll see you on Monday. And his employee said, well, no, I'm taking paternity leave. Like, you're not going to see me on Monday. And Ben was like, so I don't offer paternity leave. And this guy's worked for him for like 5 years. And he was like, what? And then he was like, real, like, told him, I'm really disappointed. I'm really going to have to think about this. Like, I gotta go. I can't talk about, I gotta hang up with you, man. I'm sorry. Like, I gotta go. I gotta talk to my wife. I gotta go. And Ben was so admonished. And then, like, it was like a whole spirally weekend. He was like, so we're providing maternity and paternity leave now. And I feel terrible. And I'm putting that time back into your sister's banked hours. Like, she is getting that in retro for the baby she had, a year ago. And I was like, those kinds of things where I'm like, that employee, that was a feminist act. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, just so you know, because we've all known each other for a really long time. I said, hey, just so you know, I've been having that conversation with him for 5 years. And it took you expressing disappointment in him to get him to move. And he goes, I know he had a good heart. I knew he wanted to, I knew he would do the right thing once I brought it to his attention. It's not cool. And I said, no, it's very not cool. And I appreciate you calling him out and calling him into that space. Right. So it's like having that space to be able to say, like, I don't know. I don't know if it's like like educating other men, or like you said, performing that feminist act to open up that space to go, no, like that's not just like something your wife is on you about. That's important. Like that's really, really important. And that's an actuality. But I think you don't get that unless you're also living in community with like minded people. right? To your point, Raena.
100%, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think men have been so normalized to, well, what, I'm not taking time. Like, why, what would I do? Like somebody literally
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, what does your husband do all day? And I was like, I'm not a cruise director. He does what needs to be done. And that
Yeah.
could be driving me to a doctor's appointment, flipping the laundry, making me food because I just pushed out a baby
Yep.
and have two other kids, taking them to school, picking them up. What does he do all day?
Yep. He's a parent all day. That's what he does. He's a parent and a partner all day, just like I am.
And I just think men don't see that. They don't understand it. There's a lot of societal pressure of like, well, Todd is making fun of me, or like saying XYZ and the third about me taking leave. And it's like, okay, like, is Todd sleeping with you? I mean, I just like, I'm confused. I'm very confused. So like, it's that kind of thing of like, it's just completely not normal to them because it hasn't been modeled for them. A man, that's not a
Mm-hmm.
man's job. And it's taking parental leave is not only a feminist act, but it is also like modeling where men need to evolve to.
Yes. And I think too, Rose Hackman talks about this in Emotional Labor, where she talks about the thing that's most dangerous for men, like societally amongst other men, is their proximity to femininity. And I think that is one of the components that you're like pointing to as well, of like, well, Todd's making fun of me. And it's like, I know that that feels like a very real threat. Let's contextualize that. I am the one that you are in a long term partnership with, right? Like, that's something that's really good to pay attention to, where it's like, if they can pinpoint, well, he thinks that I'm a girl. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you heard that, right? Like, I can
You
hear
can
it,
hear
you can
how
hear it.
ridiculous this is. You can hear
Yes.
how preposterous, absurd, just like, what is Todd doing for you? Uh,
Yep. How base, well, how unfound, like how unimportant that is. Where it's
mm-hmm.
like, it's okay that it feels like a threat. Speak it out loud. That's not an actual threat. And that's not actually, I feel like for a lot of men who are open to learning and are trying to do the right thing, I think that that is a big connector if they can speak that out loud, to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, that's not actually a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's, I think it was Joe Manchin. He was talking about, he blocked some sort of maternity leave thing a while ago.
Yeah,
And
he
what he
tanked
said,
Build Back Better completely.
so the thing that he said that really ground my gears was he said something about how his wife handled it. He was like, "Well, we didn't need maternity leave," or something like that. He's like, "I'm going to have to think about why that would be beneficial." Like, it was such an absolute, I mean, there's weaponized incompetence, there's weaponized ignorance right there. Um but so many of these rich white CEOs, politicians have had that domestic labor done for them and not had a place in that. That I think that another really important act is, if you are in a place of power, however close you are, if you're a white man in an institution, if you are have seniority, if you have any sort of power to affect, to be loud as hell, to be encouraging, to make room for other people. Like, I'm never going to have a baby again, but if I'm ever working in a place, you better believe I am going to be so outwardly supportive and loudly ask in a room, "You're taking your parental leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to show up for those few weeks? Are you and your partner going to be splitting that time to
Mm,
assume and encourage it to happen?"
mm-hmm.
And like, my husband's the only person in his business that is very male dominated who has small children. He takes the days off. He calls in and says, "I can't, there's a recital today." He is loud, and because he is in a place of power and other people see him, he's modeling this. He gets called a whatever the hell, doesn't matter. And he is like, "I'm going to stay married. My kids are going
Mm.
to miss me." They're going to know me, I'm going to know them. And that is more important to me than you calling me a name behind my back or saying something about me missing a meeting. Like, you'll be fine.
And
That's
I
really
think
powerful.
so powerful. And I think, Raena, like you were saying too, dads don't have that community, right? Of like, I'm sure that that is so lonely in a lot of ways for your husband, right? Where it's like very, like, yes, 100%. That is incredible to model that. It's incredibly lonely to trailblaze that as well. And I think we need to model, I think it would be very helpful to model and encourage. I mean, I've talked about, I will continue to talk about this probably past when my nephew was born, but my brother, my youngest sibling, is having his first baby. His wife's having their first baby in December. And I am on him of like, hey, who do you have? Right? I want to help put some people, other dads around you, because I don't want you to be lonely. Right? Like, this is a weird space, and I need for you to have people around you that can model this for you, because it is isolating, because it's not the
Mhm.
norm right now. And so it feels very risky and scary. And yeah, I mean, good on your husband, Laura, for doing that, because it's lonely. That's lonely work
Mhm. Mhm.
and so necessary.
I think this is also to your point, Crystal, is if the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody calls you a name or maybe makes a joke, like, you're strong enough to handle it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think men are so
Mm-hmm.
afraid to like feel that feeling that they don't know that
Yes.
they're not going to die if somebody makes
Mm-hmm.
fun of them, if somebody questions their manhood, if they have to be vulnerable, like, they will survive. They will
Yep.
like,
Mhm.
if you don't know because you've not
Yep.
experienced it, because you've not felt it, of course it's
Yep.
scary.
Yep. Yep. 100%. And it's the thing of like that I talk with clients in therapy a lot of like, I know that you're scared of what this might do to not push this feeling down anymore, but you have already lived through the hard parts. Like, feeling it is not the hard part. I know that that feels like it's going to kill you. The experience that you went through and stuff, you've gone through harder shit than this. You can
Mhm.
feel. You're not going to die. I know it will feel like that until you do it, but the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. But it feels so risky at the beginning.
Feelings are hard. Um, Raina, do you have any mantras?
Mantras.
Do you have any last, like, whoever's listening to this, anything you would like them to know or hear from you?
I think the biggest thing is that you're not broken. The systems and the institutions are broken. And by placing the responsibility of doing it all on you, that removes the responsibility. Um, it removes responsibility from the systems and the institutions and individualizes an institutional problem, and it forces you to internalize
Mm,
those things. And the other thing that I've been thinking about a ton is, since that the announcement about the postpartum depression drug, is there's been a lot of, we don't need, moms don't need a pill shoved down their throat. They need systemic change. And my big thing is, like, first of all, it's not a binary. But again,
mm-hmm.
it's like somebody's taking, like, the system is getting off. Like, they're getting it easier, but like, that's not what's happening. We can have multiple things. We can have multiple tools, and needing pharmaceutical help doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you per se. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that the systems still don't need to change. But babe, you are the systemic change.
Mm-hmm.
Big
Mm-hmm.
pharma is not going to do the systemic change.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
The institutions that have been set up by the people to benefit them are not going to do the systemic change. So if you want paid leave, you want affordable, accessible childcare, you want improved maternal health, to include access to medication if you need it, if and when you need it, shame free, and all of these things that you know will impact and improve maternal health and your mental health, you need to demand the systems change. They are absolutely not going to be like, oh, yes, why, yes. We need to,
Actually, now that you mention that, we'd
now
never
that you
thought of that
mention it, I don't
before.
know why we didn't think about this. No, 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 no. You are the systemic change.
And this is so interesting because I've been talking with clients about this for at least 2 weeks, in almost every client, where talking about existing under capitalism, under patriarchy, individually, that change, would you say that change for systemic purposes looks like mutual aid, chamber of mothers, being active on a local level, as well as advocating for your own needs and rights and wants?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think that the two are, it's like a multiple thing, right? But like, it is so much easier to do advocacy in community. If it's just a bunch of
Yeah.
individuals doing one thing, of course you're going to be burned the hell out and nothing's going to get
Mhm.
done because the systems aren't going to move with
Oh,
one person.
that's
That's
really
why in
interesting.
Chamber of
Yeah.
Mothers, it's like we have to unite as mothers, as advocates to push for these systems to change. And
That's
like the
so interesting.
biggest scam of all is like that moms are just moms when moms control the budget of the house, they control everything and
Mhm.
have somehow been conned into believing that they're powerless or just a mom.
Yeah, I think that that's so interesting because like that's like a light bulb reframe moment for me because as a person who's neurodivergent, who has like low emotional stores because of the nature of the work that I do at the end of the day for extra stuff. um, I think I was talking to Laura when she was helping, when she was speaking for the opening of the Chamber of Mothers for Chicago. And I was like, I would love to do something like that. I am so burned the hell out. And for me, the reframe that you just said of like, it's much easier to do in community. I wonder if like that's my internalized like individualism and capitalism of like, I have to fix the system. And it's
Mhm.
like, no, bitch, you do that in a community of people. And that actually is going to free up more space because you're going to feel like you're having an impact as
But
opposed
this
to
is,
sitting under the weight of that.
yes, and this is exactly why we need to have solidarity as mothers, not to be distracted by who's working harder. And we can't say the term working mom and all this other stuff, distractions. Because as long as you're distracted by all of those things, you'll never get to solidarity and you'll never be able to achieve systemic change. And that's the whole purpose of like they're trying to keep us, and I hate to say they, the systems, the institutions are keeping us distracted, keeping us down, keeping us divided, keeping us so devoid of like the skills, the capacity to create community. Because what would happen if we had community? The systems would
Mm-hmm.
have no choice but to change. But if you
Yeah.
have a bunch of individuals who are tired, burnt out, can't lean on their neighbor, don't have anything in common with the people that they live with, need to constantly be trying to have it all, do it all, need to drive a certain car, look a certain way, be obsessed with being thin, all of these things are distractions from like
Mm.
actually doing the work of creating community in order to create systemic change.
All right. Well, now it's 10:45 on the Pacific, and I'm done for the day. I'm outraged at systems. I'm gonna go make content for the next 3 hours because I'm so pissed. This is
uh,
It's so true. No, and I think that, I mean, again and again, I feel like we come to this conclusion a lot on this podcast, but I am so glad to hear it from you, Raina, being the co-founder of something like Chamber of Mothers, where it's like, no, community is going to be the answer. And Laura, you talk about that all the time, right? Like community is going to be the thing that brings us back to not only each other, but ourselves. And
Mhm.
we can't find that, that journey is devoid without other people. Individual therapy that I provide to each person is great, but if week after week after week they don't have other people that they can depend on and talk to and lean on and help and give help to, that's it's it's not going to be worth much. It's not going to move anybody forward.
Um, Raina, how do people find you? How do people connect with you?
I'm on Instagram at the Working Momtras. I'm on TikTok, but I'm not active at all. I occasionally watch it. I the same handle, the Working Mantras, um, and those are the main places. Find me on Instagram.
And the Chamber of Mothers, how do people get involved with that?
www.chamberofmothers.com. But we are also very active on Instagram. You can get on our email list, which is where we are sharing all the stuff that we're doing when we are doing legislative fly-ins, so meeting with legislators across both sides of the aisle to advocate for things like paid leave, the momnibus, affordable and accessible childcare, and improved maternal health. We talk about that. We talk about chapter meetings. We talk about, all of those things that we are doing to help create community so that we can unite mothers as advocates.
Y'all also make a kick-ass merch. Just like
Truly.
to throw that out there. It's the best merch that I've seen.
Thank
Your
you.
design team is incredible.
Mhm.
Thank you.
The
Thank
aesthetic
you.
is amazing. The logo, incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like it. We
Well,
love it
thank you
too.
so much for your time today, Raena. You're you're killing it. It's so wonderful to connect, to be in community with you. I love it. Thank
It's
you so
so
much.
great talking to both of you. I really respect your work, the conversations that you're having. Um, all of it is so valuable, has been so important for me. And I know it's just been important for everybody that encounters it. And even the people who don't get it yet, they
Oh,
gonna
they're gonna
learn.
get it.
Absolutely.
They're gonna.
Hmm. They sure will.
Anybody else who's listening, like, subscribe, follow in all of the places. We will have some notes in the show notes if you want to click all of the links and find Raena and the Working Momtras and the Chamber of Mothers. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.